In the darkness behind closed lids a flicker begins, so slight it would be missed in waking life. A rapid tremble beneath the skin of the eye, the body still but the gaze restless, as if watching something invisible behind the veil. This is REM, rapid eye movement, the first visible ripple in a deeper tide, the outward signal of a world stirring within. The body lies still in its nightly gravity, but inside the brain lights like a quiet city seen from above, a shimmer of activity mapped across silent folds. Neurons begin to pulse in patterns distinct from waking, neither chaotic nor regular, but something in between. A syntax not spoken, not remembered, but experienced nonetheless. Within this electric hush, activity begins to cluster in the visual cortex, even though there is no light. The occipital lobe hums with imagined shapes. The thalamus pulses as if relaying sensory information, yet no sound is heard, no touch received. Signals travel through circuits that during the day carry meaning from the outer world to the inner one, and now they do so in reverse. The brain generates its own theatre, conjures its own audience and plays its own film, all without conscious will, all without intention. Dreams unfold not as decisions but as emergent patterns, born of memory, sensation and silent chemistry. The paradox here is soft but profound. The brain, asleep, becomes more active than in many waking hours. Metabolic heat rises, oxygen consumption increases. In REM, the brain burns brighter, even while the muscles fall slack. It is not rest in the traditional sense. It is motion within stillness. There is an irony in this, that sleep, so associated with stillness, contains within it a form of hidden intensity, a theatre of movement, played in full paralysis. The brainstem initiates REM, a command from the pons, that small ancient structure at the base of the brain. A message rises, to paralyze the body, to isolate the mind, to protect it from its own rehearsal. In this temporary cage, the body cannot act out what the mind imagines. This safety becomes sanctuary. The sleeper cannot flee, cannot scream, cannot run, and yet the dream proceeds. Safe within this stillness, the circuits rehearse what cannot be resolved in waking life. This moment, flickering beneath closed lids, is not singular. REM comes in cycles, often 4 to 6 per night, each one longer than the last. The first may last only minutes, the final one may drift past an hour. It is during these late moments, in the dim hours before waking, that dreams become longest, strangest, more elaborate, and so it is that the end of sleep is the most vivid. The brain has spent hours slowly turning inwards, withdrawing from the senses, and now spins freely, untethered. The sleeper, though unaware, is participating in something deeply structured. Sleep is not a single state, but an orchestrated sequence of stages, light, deep, REM, cycling every 90 minutes like planetary orbits. The body does not simply rest, it enters and exits states, each one tasked with a different role, to clear debris, to regulate mood, to consolidate memory, to dream. In REM, memory does not merely repeat, it transforms. Visual fragments combine with the emotional undertone stored deep in the amygdala. Past fears merge with recent smells. A sound from 3 days ago becomes the door to a forgotten house. It is not random, but neither is it linear. The logic of dreams obeys no clock, no geography. There is a quiet irony here too, that the brain, a product of the outer world, spends a third of the life turned away from it. No animal has evolved to skip sleep entirely. Even dolphins, who must surface to breathe, sleep with one hemisphere at a time. Bats dream upside down. Octopuses too change colour as they sleep. flashes of pigment that seem to mimic waking life. Across the animal kingdom, REM appears again and again. Not universal, but widespread. Not optional, but conserved. That which evolution keeps across millions of years is rarely useless. And yet, we do not know why we dream. Not fully, not precisely. Theories abound, but certainty recedes. Some say it is memory consolidation. Others, emotional regulation. Some say it is rehearsal. Some, simulation. Others argue it is the byproduct of neural housekeeping, a side effect of more essential work. But even now, even with scanners and maps and models, no theory explains the whole. Dreams remain like water cupped in the hands, shimmering, partial, slipping through. This is not failure. It is the nature of the thing. The mystery is part of the architecture. The brain studies itself with its own circuits, and when it dreams, it does not explain. It performs. The story of dreaming is not linear, and neither is its study. Like the REM flicker beneath the lids, the science too moves in waves, brief bursts of clarity followed by long stillness. Still, the facts are there. REM sleep supports neurogenesis in select areas. It aids in learning, particularly of spatial tasks and emotional nuance. When deprived of REM, both animals and humans show signs of cognitive disturbance. Memory falters, mood swings sharpen, creative thinking dulls. And when allowed to return to REM, the brain rebounds, often spending more time there as if trying to catch up. Sleep debt paid in dreams. And so, the sleeper flickers. Beneath the lid, the signal rises. Somewhere the visual field is populated with things that never happened but feel as if they did. The self dissolves and reforms. A staircase climbs into the sea. A stranger speaks with your mother's voice. The sensation of falling arrives not from gravity but from memory. Nothing is happening, and yet everything is. The brain, in REM, is not a recording device. It is a painter, not a mirror, but a canvas. It does not reflect the world, it reimagines it, softly, privately, nightly. There is a final irony, lingering at the edge of sleep, that we spend a third of life wandering through a world we do not remember. We return from dreams as from a journey, with only fragments in our hands, and yet we are changed. Healing does not always need remembering. Some repairs occur in silence, in the dark. The brain does not wait for consciousness to mend itself. It begins before we notice, before we wake. Beneath the calm surface of sleep, the brain's midnight circuitry hums with precision. What seems from the outside to be simple rest is in fact a complex sequence of electrical storms travelling in curved paths through the layered structures of the cortex. In REM sleep, this orchestration becomes especially intricate. Bursts of neural activity begin in the pons, a slender stem of tissue at the brain's base, and climb upward, relayed through the thalamus, the brain's central hub, then outward to the sensory cortices. The visual cortex flares with lightless vision. The auditory cortex pulses with remembered sound. The motor cortex prepares movement that never comes. Signals flow not from the world, but from within, a reverse direction that defines dreaming. The brain speaks to itself in its own native code, and the body listens silently, held in gentle paralysis. At the same time, another quiet irony arises. The structures responsible for logical thought, for consequence and decision, namely the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, fall silent during REM. The brain remains active, but its executive voice fades. In this muted space, dreams take on their surreal logic. Time folds, identities shift, scenes drift one into another without transition. There is no narrator guiding the way, no internal editor correcting the plot. The brain accepts the strange as familiar. This suspension of disbelief is not chosen, it is neurochemical, a state induced by the sleeping brain, not imagined by the conscious one. Yet despite this oddity, patterns exist. REM sleep activates the limbic system, the same emotional core that processes fear, attachment and reward during the day. The amygdala lights brightly in dreams, so does the anterior cingulate, which mediates emotional conflict. Even when the waking mind rests, these regions remain vivid. In REM, emotion is felt without context. Joy, loss, shame, or wonder arrive without clear cause. A house floods with water that smells like childhood. A voice calls from a room you've never entered. A sudden sense of danger blooms, then passes. These are not metaphors, but neurological events, synaptic patterns that echo the structures of lived experience. To study REM is to watch the brain invent sensation. In fMRI scans, scientists observe how different areas ignite in sequences resembling perception, yet no sensory input is present. The occipital lobe pulses in rhythm with dream imagery. The fusiform face area activates even when no real face is seen. The auditory cortex responds to imagined sound, the somatosensory cortex to phantom touch. It is as if the brain, denied the outer world, simply recreates it from memory and emotion. The result is not a replica, but a parallel, a world that feels whole while it unfolds and yet dissolves upon waking. Here lies another soft paradox. During REM, neurotransmitters shift in a peculiar way. Levels of norepinephrine, the chemical associated with alertness and fear, drop dramatically. Serotonin, linked to mood and wakefulness, also declines. In contrast, acetylcholine rises, enhancing plasticity and internal connectivity. This balance, low vigilance, high imagination, creates the conditions for dream consciousness, a state neither alert nor unconscious, neither rational nor chaotic. Like a current running through a dimly lit forest, it flows without direction but not without pattern. And still, the deeper question remains. Why? Why does the brain engage in such elaborate simulations during sleep? Why do these circuits light up with no external trigger? The science is clear on mechanisms, but the function remains gently veiled. One theory suggests that dreaming helps integrate emotional experiences, resolving inner tensions through symbolic rehearsal. Another proposes that REM aids in creative problem-solving by weakening habitual associations and forming new ones. Yet another, more structural idea holds that dreaming preserves the health of neural circuits by exercising them. None of these answers contradict. All of them coexist. Like overlapping waves, each theory adds a contour to the greater shape. The idea that dreams serve no purpose has fallen from favor. When REM is disrupted, by sleep disorders, by medication, by stress, cognitive and emotional impairments tend to follow. Memory suffers, irritability increases, resilience declines. And when REM returns, it often does so in excess, a rebound effect, as if the brain must catch up on missed rehearsal. This compensation suggests utility. The brain does not waste energy on tasks without benefit. REM is metabolically expensive. To burn so brightly during rest must serve something vital, and yet there is no singular explanation. The brain does not offer simple answers. Instead, it provides patterns, shadows, and rhythms. REM sleep emerges in cycles across the night, lasting longer in each successive round. Early REM is brief and fragmented. Later REM is extended and immersive. These cycles mirror the body's circadian rhythms, but also follow their own nested timing. Ultradian rhythms that pulse every 90 minutes independent of light. The brain follows multiple clocks at once, ticking in cellular gears that measure both day and night. Even as science maps the circuitry, certain aspects remain unresolved. For instance, why do some people remember dreams vividly while others do not? Why do nightmares recur, repeating emotional loops the dreamer cannot escape? Why does dream recall decline with age, while REM sleep itself persists? These are not rhetorical questions. They are active frontiers in neuroscience, studied not with speculation, but with imaging, electrodes, and controlled environments. And still, the mystery endures. Beneath all this, a final dry observation. For a phenomena that occupies a third of human life, dreaming is astonishingly elusive. It cannot be observed directly. It cannot be recorded in full. It cannot be summoned at will. Every dream is lost in the act of waking, remembered only in fragments. Even the most vivid scenes fade quickly, as if the brain washes them away to make room for the day. And yet they leave impressions, subtle shifts, emotional adjustments, cognitive changes that resist measurement but persist nonetheless. The sleeper, unknowing, travels through these circuits. The dream does not require belief. It unfolds regardless. The eye flickers, the cortex brightens, the thalamus relays, the limbic fire stirs. And in this silent theatre, the self is not fixed. It moves, it dissolves, it watches. The dreamer may fly, speak languages never learned, grieve losses never lived. The brain permits this without judgment, without narration, without consequence. It simply moves through the circuits that evolution has built, quietly shaping the internal landscape while the world outside remains dark and still. As the sleeper drifts deeper into the night, another rhythm emerges beneath the flickering of REM, a slower, more deliberate tide that moves not with chaos, but with weight. This is slow-wave sleep, the great delta of the brain's nightly cycle, marked by long, rolling electrical oscillations across the cortex. Where REM is vivid and intense, slow-wave sleep is dense and quiet. The neurons no longer fire in erratic clusters, but in near-simultaneous pulses, like a field of reeds bending in the same wind. These waves, less than 1 hertz in frequency, rise from the depths of the brain's architecture, synchronizing large networks into a state of functional silence, interrupted only by brief flickers of memory replay. Here, in this suspended landscape, something critical occurs. The steady transfer of memory from the fragile circuits of short-term storage in the hippocampus to the durable networks of long-term knowledge embedded in the neocortex. It is an irony of quiet magnitude that this deep unconscious state is one of the most vital for remembering the conscious day. Studies show that during slow-wave sleep, recently acquired information is reactivated in miniature. Fragments of experience are replayed in compressed bursts, often in the same sequence in which they were lived. The hippocampus, once the temporary warehouse of episodic memory, begins to offload. Cortical neurons receive these signals and integrate them gradually, like a city absorbing new architecture into its skyline. This consolidation is not instantaneous. It unfolds over hours, across multiple nights. The traces of experience are not stamped in place but grown slowly, nourished by repetition and protected by sleep. Within this architecture, another layer of precision appears. Not all memories are treated equally. The brain, even in sleep, appears to prioritize certain experiences, emotionally charged ones, surprising events, information tagged with relevance or urgency. A soft bias unfolds. The significant is replayed more often, while the trivial fades. And yet, the rules are not fully understood. Sometimes, a face glimpsed only briefly will recur in a dream, Sometimes a fact learned with effort will vanish by morning. Sleep selects without clear logic, guided perhaps by patterns not yet visible to us. The mystery remains, why some traces remain and others dissolve. At the heart of this process are sleep spindles, brief bursts of oscillatory activity that ripple through the thalamus and cortex during non-REM sleep, particularly stage 2. These spindles, lasting only a second or two, play a role in shielding the brain from external noise, allowing uninterrupted consolidation to continue, but they also appear to mark windows of communication between the hippocampus and cortex, synchronizing the transfer of information. In this way, the sleeping brain builds bridges, not just between neurons, but between past and future, between experience and identity. Another subtle actor is the K-complex, a sharp wave often triggered by sensory stimuli like a sound or a touch. Rather than waking the sleeper, the K-complex absorbs the disturbance, maintaining sleep by momentarily increasing cortical vigilance. It is the brain's gentle gatekeeper, allowing sleep to continue in the face of minor interruptions. Together, spindles and K-complexes form a protective shell, a kind of neural insulation within which deeper processes can unfold undisturbed. Here lies a quiet paradox. The sleeper is unaware of any of this. The circuits, the replay, the consolidation, and yet, the next day, they recall a name more easily, respond more calmly, solve a problem with unexpected insight. The improvements are subtle, but measurable. Sleep has done its work without ceremony. Memory is not only retained, but refined. Emotional charge is softened. Connections are made. Insight becomes more likely. It is a form of intelligence that unfolds without waking effort, a cognitive moonlight that illuminates by absence rather than focus. Still, the full picture is incomplete. While we understand that slow-wave sleep plays a role in memory consolidation, the precise mechanisms remain under study. Do individual memories replay as entire sequences, or only as fragments? Are there thresholds of significance that determine what is stored? Can we influence these processes through deliberate learning, or even through the content of our thoughts before bed? Some findings suggest yes, that targeted memory reactivation during sleep is possible, but the ethical and cognitive boundaries of such influence remain hazy. The brain is not a machine into which commands can simply be typed. It is an ecology, its rhythms must be respected, and there is still more mystery. Why do we forget our dreams so quickly, yet retain waking memories more effectively after sleep? Why does sleep deprivation impair some cognitive functions while leaving others intact? Why does the architecture of sleep, with its stages and sequences, remain so conserved across species? In every case, the deeper we look, the more intricate the design becomes. What once seemed simple rest is now revealed as a tapestry of coordinated processes, each with its own timing, chemistry, and function. Perhaps the most subtle irony of all is this, that while sleep serves memory, it also permits forgetting. The brain prunes synaptic connections during sleep, especially during slow-wave stages, removing excess or redundant links. This synaptic downscaling keeps the brain efficient, preventing the build-up of unnecessary patterns. Without it, the system would become saturated, clogged with unimportant detail. Forgetting in this light is not a flaw but a feature, a way of maintaining clarity. The dream fades, the moment passes, the name that once seemed vital now slips gently from view. It is not erasure, it is balance. And so the sleeper lies still, while within currents shift and settle. Slow waves roll across the cortex like ocean swells, deep and regular. Spindles flicker like heat lightning. Memory replays in miniature. Unnecessary signals are silenced. The self, once vivid with experience, becomes a landscape under snow, quiet, preserved, altered. No will guides this, no conscious thought. Only the circadian clock continues its patient rotation, cueing each phase in turn. The body breathes, the circuits hum, and morning remains far off, hidden behind the velvet drape of deep sleep. Inside the sleeping brain, where consciousness has receded and sensation no longer anchors the self to the outer world, a quieter form of intelligence persists. Not the intelligence of reason or reflection, but of refinement. This is the work of synaptic sculpting, a process both intricate and continuous, where connections between neurons are strengthened, weakened, or delicately removed. The principle is simple in theory. Learning creates synaptic growth, but sleep determines which of those new pathways endure. By day, experience floods the brain with activity. Each new sound, sight, gesture, or word leaves a trace, a pattern of activation. But not all traces are useful, not all deserve permanence. So by night, the brain begins to prune, to assess, to pare down the noise. The term is synaptic homeostasis. The result is clarity. This process unfolds with astonishing subtlety. Neurons communicate through synapses, tiny gaps bridged by neurotransmitters, and each time two neurons fire together, the bridge between them strengthens. But if every connection forged during waking were to persist indefinitely, the brain would become overwhelmed by its own history. Synapses would grow dense, inefficient, unstable. Sleep prevents this by scaling back. The less active connections are trimmed, the more active ones are preserved. This sculpting does not erase, but refines. It favors the essential over the redundant. Like a gardener shaping a growing tree, the brain cuts not to diminish, but to guide. This idea, that sleep helps determine what matters, is supported by decades of research. In young animals, where learning is rapid and plasticity high, sleep deprivation leads to disorganized synaptic growth. In adults, the same deprivation impairs memory, focus, and mood. And in both, sleep restores balance. Proteins associated with synaptic regulation, such as HOMA1A and ARC, increase during waking and decrease after sleep, indicating that molecular housekeeping is underway. In human studies, structural changes in dendritic spines, the small outgrowths where synapses form, have been observed across the sleep-wake cycle. The architecture shifts. The mind refines itself without ever asking permission. Yet despite the growing clarity of these mechanisms, questions remain. Does the brain always know which connections to keep? What happens when trauma or stress skews the balance? Can important memories be lost through over-pruning? The answers are complex. In some cases, stress hormones interfere with normal synaptic regulation, leading to either excessive retention or premature loss. In others, repetitive or emotionally charged memories may be reinforced even when they are not useful. The sculptor, it seems, does not always work with perfect precision, but even its imperfections follow rules encoded in chemistry and time. There is a quiet contradiction in this as well. The brain, while deeply engaged in internal editing, is also deeply cut off from the world. Sensory input falls away during sleep, the eyes closed, the ears dulled, the skin untouched, and yet, inside, the circuits remain responsive. The pruning process depends on the activity history of each synapse, a cumulative echo of past experience. Sleep does not judge in real time. It reviews the traces. The present is muted, but the past is active. The self is paused, but the brain continues its quiet labor. This disconnection is not total. The brain remains partially alert to danger, A distant sound, a shift in temperature, a sudden light may trigger micro-arousals or even full awakening. But within the protected envelope of slow wave and REM sleep, the default state is internal focus. The outer world recedes, allowing the inner one to recalibrate. One irony here is that the more we learn, the more we must forget. Experience is additive, but understanding requires subtraction. The night's pruning clears space not only for new memories, but for insight, for abstraction, for clarity, for perspective that waking cannot always provide. In children, whose brains are growing rapidly, synaptic density reaches a peak far higher than in adults. Over time, much of that density is reduced through pruning, guided by interaction, repetition, and sleep. The infant brain, awash in new experience, must select which patterns to preserve. Sleep is abundant in infancy, as much as 16 hours a day, and REM sleep occupies a greater share than in adulthood. This surplus is not idle. It corresponds with critical periods of learning, language acquisition, and sensory calibration. In this way, dreams may help shape the mind before the self is fully formed. In adults, pruning shifts from sensory to cognitive, from foundational circuits to more abstract patterns, habits, thoughts, expectations. A repeated worry may be reinforced, a fleeting curiosity may be erased. Sleep does not decide what is valuable. It reflects the patterns established by waking, and so what we attend to by day may return at night, not in content but in connectivity. The neural pathways we reinforce become the ones we retain. The brain, ever plastic, responds to usage. In sleep, it prepares for tomorrow by shaping yesterday. Still, not all pruning is gentle. In certain neurodegenerative conditions, such as Alzheimer's disease, the pruning processes become dysregulated. The brain loses more than it intends. Synapses vanish, not by design, but through decay. Sleep itself becomes fragmented. REM decreases. Slow-wave sleep shortens. The architecture breaks, and with it, memory fails. This link between healthy sleep and cognitive integrity has become a field of urgent study, not just for repair, but for prevention. To sleep well is to preserve the mind's scaffolding. To dream is to maintain the bridge between now and then. Even so, there are limits. Sleep cannot fix everything. Some memories are too chaotic, some patterns too rigid. The pruning process can only refine what has been lived. It cannot rewrite history, but it can reshape its residue. A loss once sharp may fade. A fear once urgent may dim. The brain does not erase the story. It softens the outline. It allows space for the next layer to form. And so the sleeper breathes. The circuits quiet. The unnecessary is set aside. The necessary is reinforced. No alarm sounds to signal this work. No conscious awareness marks its passing. But in the morning, something is different. A thought arrives more quickly. A decision feels clearer. A burden seems lighter. These are not miracles. They are the result of hours spent in silence, in darkness, beneath the surface of the self. In the deep quiet of sleep, beyond memory and beyond dream, the brain performs a slow, rhythmic cleansing, not of thoughts or feelings, but of its physical self. This is the work of the glymphatic system, a newly charted network that functions as the brain's own waste clearance mechanism. Unlike the rest of the body, where the lymphatic system carries away metabolic byproducts, the brain relies on this separate hidden circuit, a pathway that lies dormant during wakefulness, but comes alive as consciousness recedes. It is a pulse without awareness, a cleaning without command. During sleep, cerebrospinal fluid flows more freely between cells, washing through neural tissue in slow tides, carrying with it the detritus of the day, spent neurotransmitters, broken proteins, fragments of cellular debris. These are not metaphors, but molecules. Tau proteins, beta amyloid, metabolic residues that, if allowed to accumulate, may contribute to the pathology of neurodegenerative diseases. And yet the body has devised a nightly ritual of maintenance, elegant and silent, built into the architecture of rest. This clearance process increases dramatically during slow-wave sleep. As neurons reduce their activity and the body enters its most restful phase, the spaces between brain cells widen by as much as 60%. This expansion allows cerebrospinal fluid to move more easily, flowing through perivascular channels along the blood vessels and into the interstitial space. There, it collects waste and carries it toward the veins, where it can be transported out and reabsorbed. The pattern is cyclical, driven in part by the pulsing of arteries and the slow waves of neuronal activity. Each heartbeat, each breath, helps guide the flow. It is a form of internal tide, coordinated but unconscious. The brain, sleeping, cleans itself not with force but with rhythm. There is a certain quiet irony in this discovery. For centuries the brain was believed to lack its own lymphatic drainage, a closed world protected by the blood-brain barrier, isolated from the cleansing systems of the body. Only recently have researchers identified this glymphatic process, named for the glial cells that facilitate it and the lymphatic function it mimics. It is not fast, but it is effective. During wakefulness, the brain's energy is directed outward, toward perception, action, decision. During sleep, that energy is redirected inward, toward renewal. What cannot be done during the day must wait for night. This internal cleaning is not merely biological hygiene, it is preservation. The proteins cleared during sleep are not trivial. In Alzheimer's disease, the accumulation of beta amyloid plaques and tau tangles is one of the defining pathologies. Studies in animals show that glymphatic clearance of these proteins is significantly higher during sleep than during wakefulness. Deprive the brain of sleep, and these toxins accumulate. Restore sleep, and they diminish. The connection between rest and resilience, long suspected, is now seen under the microscope. It is not just that sleep restores the mind, it protects the brain from itself. Still, questions remain. The glymphatic system has been observed in rodents, but its full behavior in humans is still being mapped. Do the same clearance rates occur? Are there differences with age, with circadian rhythm, with sleep depth? How does posture, sleeping on one side versus back, affect the flow? Preliminary findings suggest that even these minor variables may influence the efficiency of the system. Gravity, position, arterial pressure, all play a role. The process is not only internal, it is anatomical. And perhaps this too is part of sleep's design, not a single mechanism, but a constellation of conditions aligned by time, habit, and physiology. Here lies another soft mystery. If sleep serves so many functions, memory consolidation, synaptic pruning, emotional regulation, waste clearance, how are these processes sequenced? Do they occur in isolation or overlap? Is there a hidden order to the night's architecture, a choreography beneath the visible rhythms of REM and non-REM? The science remains incomplete. We know that slow-wave sleep dominates the early night, when glymphatic activity peaks, and that REM sleep increases toward dawn, when dreaming and emotion come to the fore. But how these processes interact, how one stage prepares for the next, remains under study. Sleep may be a single word, but it is not a single thing. Even the fluid itself holds a quiet duality. Cerebrospinal fluid is not static. It is produced continuously, circulating through the ventricles and around the brain and spinal cord. It cushions, it transports, It nourishes, and during sleep it takes on a new role, purifier. In recent imaging studies, researchers have observed large, slow waves of fluid washing through the ventricles in synchrony with neural oscillations. The sight is both clinical and poetic. The brain pulsing, flushing, breathing in a language of pressure and flow. It is a reminder that thought is built on matter, and that consciousness, no matter how abstract, depends on biology. This merging of function and form is not limited to pathology. Even in health, the consequences of poor sleep are cumulative. Inadequate lymphatic clearance can lead to subtle cognitive declines. Fog, inattention, forgetfulness. These symptoms are not merely psychological, they are metabolic. The brain, overworked and undercleansed, begins to slow. Over time, chronic disruption of sleep is associated with increased risk of neurodegenerative disease. The science does not suggest that sleeplessness causes dementia, but that it may hasten the decline or diminish the brain's ability to repair. In this way, the night becomes a window not only into the present but into the future, a nightly investment in the stability of the mind. And yet there is no awareness of this work. No sensation accompanies the fluid's passage. No signal alerts the sleeper to the cleaning underway. It is silent, unseen, unremembered, but not insignificant. The most vital repairs often occur in silence. The heart beats, the breath flows, the fluid moves, and morning arrives, carrying a mind more ready for the day. It is not dramatic. It is essential. So the brain sleeps, and the tide moves through its hidden channels. Waste is drawn away, balance is restored. Neurons, freed from the byproducts of activity, settle into equilibrium. And in this act, the mind is not only rested but renewed. The architecture holds. The circuits remain clear. The organism once again prepares to think, to feel, to be. No ceremony marks this event. No awareness lingers. But the system continues, night after night, as old as breath, as necessary as silence. Within the dreaming brain, as REM sleep deepens and logic fades, a peculiar silence begins to take hold, not in volume, but in structure. The part of the brain responsible for executive control, for ordering thoughts, for separating truth from fiction, lies dormant. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, so central in waking life, goes quiet. It is an absence that allows other voices to emerge. Without the strict oversight of rationality, the dream begins to unfold with its own strange grammar. Non-linear, emotional, often impossible. There is no narrator here, no editor. Events emerge not as sequences but as sensations. One image becomes another. Places blur. Time unravels. The dream has no need for coherence, because coherence is a waking constraint. What matters now is affect, association, proximity. Not cause and effect, but symbol and drift. It is this very absence of control that allows dreaming to be what it is, spontaneous, recursive, and free from the constraints of reason. There is no architect, and yet the dream builds itself. The paradox is quiet but sharp. The brain in REM is intensely active, with neural firing patterns as dense as those seen during wakefulness, and yet the patterns are differently arranged. The limbic system, including the amygdala and hippocampus, becomes vividly engaged. Emotional memory floods the field. The brain is not passive, but improvisational. It stitches together fragments from across time. A hallway glimpsed years ago, a recent argument, a sound overheard, and presents them as lived experience. But the context is missing. The emotional salience remains, while the facts blur. You know you are falling, but not from where. You recognize a voice, but not the speaker. Faces appear with no names. This dream world is both familiar and alien, built from the contents of the mind but reordered into something new. This is not an error, it is a function. In the absence of prefrontal supervision, the brain explores connections it would never permit in daylight. The improbable becomes accessible, the forbidden becomes harmless. Associations that would normally be dismissed are allowed to unfold. The mind rehearses without stakes, grieves without consequence, imagines without judgment. This is not therapy. It is process. A way for the brain to move through its own complexity without needing to explain itself. Many dreams feel nonsensical upon waking, but within the neural space that created them, they are coherent enough to proceed. The system permits its own logic. There is a subtle irony here. The very thing that would prevent dreaming, the rational scrutiny of the waking mind, is precisely what sleeps. And so, the dream persists, uninterrupted. It is not questioned. It is not stopped. Even the strangest transitions go unchallenged. A desert becomes a school. A childhood home floats above a train. These are not mistakes. They are permissions. And the brain, unburdened by rules, rehearses its own material in fluid form. Scientific studies have shown this pattern of activation clearly. During REM sleep, PET and fMRI imaging reveal heightened activity in the limbic system, especially the amygdala and medial temporal lobes, while the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex remains markedly deactivated. This imbalance, emotion without oversight, gives rise to the intensity and surrealism of dreams. The effect is not randomness, but emotional depth untethered from the limits of linear thought. It is not illogical, it is differently logical. This peculiar arrangement invites gentle mystery. Why does the brain design itself to sleep its own supervisor? Why allow such strange narratives to unfold without interruption? One theory suggests that by suspending judgment, the brain can explore new possibilities, recombine emotional and cognitive fragments, and discover patterns it would not allow during wakefulness. This may enhance creativity, assist in emotional processing, or even prepare the mind for future challenges. But none of these answers are definitive. The question remains open, like the dream itself. Still, the benefits of this state are visible at the edges. Creativity studies show that people who enter REM sleep before performing complex tasks tend to find more novel solutions. Emotional experiences that feel overwhelming by day often seem more manageable after a night of sleep. The brain appears to diffuse intensity, redistribute weight, reframe the frame. But it does this not through instruction or logic, but through immersive simulation, not speech, but image. Another quiet observation. This same deactivation of control may explain why lucid dreaming is rare. To become aware that one is dreaming requires a spark of metacognition, the ability to observe the experience from outside it. For most sleepers, this spark is absent. The dreamer accepts the impossible as ordinary, but in those few moments when the prefrontal cortex stirs and the dreamer recognizes the illusion, a delicate balance is achieved. The dream becomes both seen and felt. It is a fragile state. Often the awareness ends the dream, sometimes it reshapes it, but always it points to the strangeness of the system. A simulation so vivid it can be mistaken for the world, but so unstable it collapses under reflection. And yet dreaming continues regardless. Whether remembered or not, whether coherent or fragmented, dreams occur in every REM cycle. Even those who claim they never dream are simply unable to recall them. The brain generates these internal narratives automatically, rhythmically, without request. It does not require permission or intention. It simply follows its own architecture, a nightly recitation of neural possibility. There is a final irony, soft and persistent. The dreams we remember are not always the most important. Some vanish within seconds, some linger for years. Their content may be dramatic, but their function is often quiet, invisible even. We dream and we change, but we do not always notice the link. The transformation is slow, recursive, scattered across nights and seasons. The brain heals itself not through grand gestures, but through sustained improvisation. The dreams drift on without need for interpretation or resolution. They pass through us, altering the terrain in ways too subtle to trace. So the sleeper lies still, the eyes flickering behind closed lids. The body rests in place, held by the paralysis of REM. But inside, the world flows. Not the world of waking, but a parallel world built of memory, emotion, and circuitry. No director calls the shots, no narrator holds the thread. The brain, in its dreaming state, is both actor and stage, both sound and silence. And as it moves through this darkened theatre, something essential is allowed to continue. Unmeasured, unspoken, unresisted. In the calm interior of the sleeping brain, where thoughts no longer cling to time and images drift without anchor, another hidden theatre stirs, not one of stories or movement, but of emotion. While the conscious mind sleeps, the limbic system remains active, a slow-burning fire in the night. The amygdala, centre of fear and feeling, continues to flare. The anterior cingulate, involved in conflict and empathy, whispers through the circuits. Even in deep rest, the emotional core does not sleep. It works quietly, reprocessing, reframing, redistributing. This is not catharsis. It is calibration. The sleeper feels nothing consciously, yet the architecture of emotion is being touched and adjusted. Unlike memory consolidation, which moves information from short-term to long-term storage, emotional processing in sleep is less about location and more about modulation, a tuning of signals, a softening of sharpness, a gentle mending of distress. Research reveals that REM sleep plays a unique role in this process. When a person experiences strong emotional events during the day, the first night's sleep begins to dampen the physiological intensity of those experiences. The memory remains, but the emotional charge is reduced. The cortisol system, which governs stress, decreases activity. Meanwhile, the neurochemical profile of REM, low norepinephrine, high acetylcholine, creates a state in which emotional memories can be replayed without retriggering full sympathetic arousal. The dream does not reenact the trauma. It moves around it, through it, in ways that are distorted but meaningful. A face returns, but in a different setting. A tone of voice reappears, but the dialogue changes. These fragments do not heal in a single night, but they begin to reweave. This reweaving does not require attention. In fact, attention interferes. The waking mind wants narrative, justice, resolution. The dreaming brain offers none of these. It drifts, it suggests, it rehearses in symbols and metaphor, allowing conflicting emotions to be held at once. One image can carry fear and comfort simultaneously. One figure can switch roles, aggressor, protector, stranger, with no warning and no need for explanation. In dreams, binary categories blur. This fluidity is not a flaw. It is essential. The emotional brain thrives on nuance, on complexity that resists logic but obeys internal rhythm. Studies using polysomnography and affective assessments confirm this strange precision. People who sleep after experiencing fear or sadness report reduced reactivity to the same stimuli the next day. When deprived of REM sleep, however, emotional reactivity increases. The amygdala becomes more volatile, the prefrontal cortex less effective at regulation. It is as if the emotional brain becomes ungrounded. And when REM is restored, the balance returns. This suggests a cyclical need. Emotion must be revisited at night in order to remain manageable by day. Still, the exact mechanisms remain elusive. What determines which emotional memories are replayed? Why do some dreams feel cathartic while others increase unease? Is the content of dreams important, or only their neurophysiological context? Current science leans toward function over interpretation. The specific dream may not matter. What matters is the opportunity it creates. A low norepinephrine environment in which strong emotional circuits can activate without triggering full distress. In this sense, dreaming provides a kind of emotional rehearsal space, one free from consequence, yet capable of lasting adjustment. This process is not always comforting. Nightmares, especially in post-traumatic conditions, suggest that sometimes the brain becomes stuck, replaying fear without resolution, unable to move forward. In these cases, the circuitry of emotional memory becomes too rigid, too hyperactive. The brain cannot fully decouple the memory from its charge. Treatments such as imagery rehearsal therapy, which involves rewriting nightmares while awake, aim to change this pattern, giving the brain a new blueprint to follow during sleep. The results are mixed but promising. They suggest that while dreams cannot be commanded, they can sometimes be guided, gently, respectfully, in alignment with the brain's own rules. There is a soft irony here, that the very emotions we avoid by day may find us at night, not to harm but to heal. The brain does not forget what the conscious mind ignores. It returns to the unresolved, again and again, in symbolic form, until the edges begin to dull. A voice grows fainter. A place feels less charged. A situation no longer repeats. This is not forgetting. It is integration. The feeling is not lost. It is softened into something that can be carried. The architecture of this process is ancient. REM sleep appears in nearly all mammals, from humans to rats to cats. Emotional dreaming is not unique to us. Experiments have shown that animals deprived of REM sleep show increased fear responses, reduced learning, and impaired social behavior. They too seem to need the strange world of the dream to stabilize their inner lives. A rat may dream of a maze it ran. A cat may twitch its whiskers in sleep. Their dreams cannot be known, but the circuitry is shared. Evolution has preserved this state across species and eras, not as ornament, but as necessity. Another quiet mystery remains. Why do we so rarely remember these emotional dreams? Even the most vivid sequences fade quickly upon waking. Perhaps the forgetting is part of the healing, a way of protecting the work, like bandages that fall away after the wound has closed. Or perhaps the brain simply does not store these fragments as declarative memory. It allows the process, but not the record. What matters is the result. A calmer morning, a gentler edge, a burden slightly lessened. And so, night after night, the brain returns to its emotional core. It does not solve, but it reshapes. It does not forget, but it relieves. The circuits fire. The chemicals shift. A scene is replayed, not to repeat, but to loosen. The body rests, unaware. But the mind, in its deeper layers, is busy with care. Not loud, not visible, but precise. The dream may carry no words, but it does its work. And when the sleeper wakes, they rise with something lighter, even if they do not know why. As the body lies still and the outer world dims, the brain enters another quiet rotation, a return not to silence but to background hum, a space between attention and absence known as the default mode. It is a network, not a single place, a constellation of regions spanning the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, among others. And it becomes active when the mind is at rest, when no task is being performed, when nothing specific is demanded. During wakefulness, the default mode network hums quietly during daydreaming, self-reflection, and mental time travel. But during sleep, and especially in the dreamy twilight of REM, it begins to weave something more layered, an internal narrative constructed from fragments of memory, emotion, identity, and imagination. Here, the self is not fixed. It is reconstructed moment by moment, scene by scene. Not the factual self of biography, but the felt self of sensation, mood, and impression. This is the dreaming self, fluid, fragile, and continually invented. The brain's default mode network appears paradoxical at first glance. It activates not when we do, but when we don't. It quiets during goal-directed tasks and flares to life in their absence. It is associated with mind-wandering, with imagining others' thoughts, with remembering the past and envisioning the future. In sleep, when external input is reduced and executive control relaxed, this network remains active, perhaps even more so than during waking daydreams. It becomes the scaffolding for dreams, providing continuity of self across scenes, lending shape to emotional drift, connecting disparate images with the thread of internal logic. Without it, dreams might be purely random. With it, they carry the illusion of sequence, of narrative, of presence. Yet even here there is irony. The default mode network is deeply associated with the sense of self, yet the self in dreams is inconsistent, unstable. You are yourself, but also someone else. You remember things that never happened. You speak without hearing your own voice. The dream self is a ghost, present enough to perceive but not anchored in continuity. This decoupling may reflect the unique way the network functions during REM. Unlike in waking life, when its activity is moderated by the frontoparietal control network, in sleep it operates without oversight. Its associations run freely, unchecked, recombining memory and imagination into something new. The dream self is not the waking ego. It is a construct made from parts of it, familiar but strange. This observation leads to deeper questions. What is the purpose of this constructed self? Why does the brain go to such lengths to simulate presence, agency, and continuity in a space without consequence? One possibility is that it provides a simulation space, a way to rehearse interpersonal dynamics, to test scenarios, to process relational emotion. Another suggests that it maintains the structural integrity of selfhood, a nightly rehearsal that preserves identity in the absence of external reference points. A third theory views it as a byproduct, a side effect of other cognitive maintenance tasks. As with so much in neuroscience, the answers are partial, overlapping, and unresolved. Still, the effect is clear. The default mode network during REM is part of a broader architecture of narrative construction. It links emotional tone with spatial imagery, memory fragments with symbolic stand-ins. The dream does not proceed like a story, but the mind interprets it as one. It places the self in a setting. It provides events, transitions, conclusions, not through deliberate creation, but through emergent association. The sleeper does not write the dream. The brain assembles it piece by piece in real time, drawing from the endless archive of lived experience. Scientific imaging supports this function. Functional MRI studies show that the default mode network is highly active during REM sleep, in conjunction with increased limbic activity and reduced executive oversight. This constellation, narrative generation, emotional salience, and reduced reality checking, defines the dreaming state. It explains why dreams feel meaningful, even when they make no sense, why a gesture can carry immense weight, why a word can feel like revelation. The network is not constructing logic, it is sustaining presence. But presence is not always comfort. In some dreams, the self becomes fragmented. Emotions turn contradictory. The narrative dissolves into confusion. These moments are not malfunctions. They reflect the variability of the system, a system that is always improvising, always adjusting. The default mode network is deeply sensitive to mental health. In depression, for instance, its activity can become overactive, ruminative. In PTSD, the default mode may become entangled with intrusive memory networks. Sleep, and particularly REM, may help untangle these connections, but the process is not always smooth. Nightmares, disorientation, and emotional turbulence may be signs of an ongoing recalibration. The dream self, like the waking self, is not always at ease. Even in health, the self in dreams changes. With age, dream recall declines. The emotional intensity may soften, but the network remains. The self continues to appear, sometimes vividly, sometimes faintly, woven into the dream's fabric, shaped by the very system that defines us in waking life. The same brain that speaks our name, that holds our history, also invents new versions of us every night, slipping them into silent narratives that no one else will ever see. The paradox is profound and ordinary. We dream ourselves again and again, each time differently. And then morning comes, the network shifts, the focus returns to the outer world. Tasks, goals, conversations resume. The default mode quiets, the dream fades, the self returns to its daytime uniform, coherent, continuous, accountable. But somewhere, beneath the surface, the scaffolding of sleep remains. The mind has wandered, drifted, rehearsed. It has explored itself from the inside out. No memory may survive, no insight may emerge. But the structure has been maintained, the self has been tended, so the sleeper breathes, unaware of the vast internal engine that sustains the illusion of continuity. The dream self walks through impossible corridors, speaks with the dead, flies without wings, and the network hums, keeping time, not for performance, not for meaning, but because this too is the brain at rest. Dreaming not just images, but the idea of being. Inside the skull, sealed away from sky and soil, lies a timekeeper older than memory. A dense cluster of cells no larger than a grain of rice, nestled in the hypothalamus, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is the master clock, the silent orchestrator of circadian rhythm. It pulses in cycles of roughly 24 hours, not by chance but by evolutionary design, tuned over eons to the turning of Earth itself. Light enters the eyes, even when closed, even through lids, and sends signals along the optic nerve directly to this nucleus, informing it that day has begun or that night remains. From here, the message travels outward, to the pineal gland, which secretes melatonin, to the adrenal glands, which regulate cortisol, to the liver, the heart, the skin. Every cell in the body keeps its own time, but all defer to the brain's central clock. It is this alignment, this delicate synchronization, that allows sleep to occur not as accident but as design. The irony is quiet and unceasing. Though the brain determines the rhythm, it depends on the world to set the pace. Without light, the circadian clock drifts. In total darkness, it extends slightly beyond 24 hours. In disrupted light, it misaligns. Shift work, jet lag, and artificial brightness confuse the system, and the body, confused, struggles to sleep, to digest, to think. The brain resists disorder but cannot override it entirely. It must be entrained again, slowly, patiently, through repeated exposure to natural light and structured darkness. The cycle is not rigid, it is responsive, but it is not optional. Every function, from hormone release to temperature regulation, obeys this rhythm. Even dreams are not immune. REM sleep intensifies near morning, aligned with the rising curve of body temperature and the decline of melatonin. The cycles of sleep are not merely internal, they are planetary. This planetary alignment reveals something deeper. Sleep, for all its complexity, is not a passive state imposed by fatigue. It is an active rhythmic program, guided by a clock set to the world's turning. The phases of sleep, light, deep, REM, unfold in repeating 90-minute cycles, but the architecture of those cycles changes with the night's passage. In early night, deep sleep dominates, allowing for memory consolidation and glymphatic clearance. In later hours, REM lengthens, allowing for dreaming and emotional recalibration. This temporal layering is not a coincidence. It is structured, regulated by clock genes and cellular oscillators embedded in nearly every tissue. The human body is not a machine with a power switch. It is a symphony of clocks, each tuned to the pulse of the earth. And yet this system is delicate. Even small misalignments can have effects. Sleeping at irregular hours, waking to bright screens, ignoring cues from light and dark. These seemingly modern habits strain a system built for predictability. Melatonin secretion is delayed. Cortisol surges at the wrong time. Sleep onset becomes more difficult, and dream architecture alters. The result may not be visible, but it is felt. In sluggish mornings, in frayed attention, in emotional volatility. The master clock does not punish, it simply responds. Its precision is not moral, but molecular. Scientists have observed this with growing clarity. In studies of individuals living in constant darkness or under artificial schedules, circadian rhythms quickly desynchronize. Mood declines, cognitive performance drops, REM sleep becomes fragmented. Recovery takes time. Realignment requires not only rest but light, natural, full-spectrum daylight at regular intervals. In this sense, sleep is not only biological but ecological. It depends on our place in the cycle of day and night, our exposure to rhythms we did not create but must still obey. The brain may generate the rhythm, but the sun sets the tempo. This raises gentle mysteries. Why should so many processes, metabolism, immunity, even gene expression, follow a daily rhythm? Why would the dream need to come near morning? What benefit arises from aligning inner cycles with outer ones? One answer is energy efficiency. Another is coordination among cells, organs, behaviors. But these answers feel partial. The deeper truth may lie not in explanation, but in recognition. The human body is not separate from the world, but embedded in it, shaped by tides of light and shadow. Sleep, and by extension dreaming, is not a retreat from life, but a return to its deeper cadence. Some organisms show this rhythm even without brains. Cyanobacteria, single-celled and ancient, still follow a 24-hour cycle of gene activation. Plants open and close their leaves, regardless of weather. The rhythm predates consciousness. It is not about sleep, but about life itself, about predictability in an unpredictable world. The brain, complex as it is, did not escape this structure. It refined it. In mammals, especially in humans, the sleep-wake cycle became not just biological but experiential. The brain began to dream, not just because of circadian regulation, but in harmony with it. There is a final irony worth noting. We speak of time as if it were linear, external, governed by clocks and calendars, but the brain measures time differently, in waves, pulses, intervals. The 90-minute sleep cycle is one such interval. So is the 24-hour circadian rhythm. So are the ultradian rhythms that govern attention and digestion. These internal clocks are imperfect, but persistent. Even when we ignore them, they continue. Even when we sleep, they guide the sequence. And dreams, which seem timeless, arrive on schedule. So the sleeper turns and the cycle continues. The master clock ticks in silence. Melatonin rises with dusk. The body cools. The eyelids grow heavy. Deep sleep comes, followed by REM. The dream appears, not suddenly, but as part of a slow unfolding, timed to the rise and fall of inner tides. The sleeper does not feel the clockwork, but obeys it nonetheless. And when morning arrives, the brain begins to wake, not all at once, but in stages, reversing the sequence, realigning with the light. In the darkness of REM, where logic is hushed and sensation drifts untethered, the brain begins a curious task. It constructs a world. Not a replica of the waking world, but a simulation, vivid, unstable, strangely complete. Shapes emerge, sounds unfold, characters appear. The dream feels real not because it mimics the outer world exactly, but because the brain treats it as real. Visual cortices activate, auditory regions fire, the somatosensory strip lights with phantom touch. Internally generated signals are mistaken for external input, and the dream self accepts the illusion without protest. This is the hallucinated self, a mind within a mind, walking through imagined rooms, speaking with conjured voices, unaware of the fiction it inhabits. There is no audience, there is no witness, only the brain, perceiving its own creation as if it were other. It begins with construction. The primary visual cortex, the same area that interprets light in waking, now responds to internally generated signals. It reassembles stored fragments, faces, walls, trees, skies, layering them into coherent scenes. At the same time, the temporal lobes contribute memory traces, emotional colour, auditory contours. The hippocampus, though quieter than in waking, continues to influence spatial navigation. The parietal lobes help orient the dreamer's body in this imagined space. Even the insula, involved in internal sensation, may generate feelings of temperature, hunger, pain. The illusion is not total, but it is sufficient. The dreamer moves through a world that is not there and does not know the difference. The irony here is subtle but immense. The brain, evolved to detect external stimuli and distinguish self from other, now turns its full power inward, creating a theatre so immersive that it convinces itself of its own reality. This is not delusion, but design. The dream requires the suspension of disbelief, and the brain provides it by disabling or reducing activity in areas responsible for critical reflection. The prefrontal cortex, as before, steps aside. The sense of agency is preserved, but the capacity for self-monitoring is not. The dreamer acts but does not question. In this way, the hallucinated self persists. But what is the purpose of this nightly illusion? Why should the brain simulate a self in motion when the body lies still? One theory holds that this is rehearsal, a safe environment for testing scenarios, exploring fears, replaying conflicts. Another suggests it is maintenance, a way to preserve the continuity of identity across states of consciousness. Still others propose that it is byproduct, an emergent property of neural activity with no direct function, simply a reflection of the brain's ongoing computation. Each view offers part of the truth, and none claims the whole. Regardless of its origin, the hallucinated self is structured. Most dreams occur in the first person. The dreamer sees from their own perspective, moves through space, experiences emotion. This consistency suggests that the brain's self-model, the internal representation of the body and mind, remains partially intact during sleep. The dream self may lack continuity, but it possesses presence. It may forget facts, but it retains form. This self is felt, if not remembered. Still, the boundaries of the self are porous in dreaming. One may shift identities, take on other forms, observe from outside the body. These shifts occur without alarm. The dream accepts them as natural. This fluidity may reflect the loosened coupling between cortical areas during REM. Without strict connectivity, the brain allows for more flexible constructions of self. Identity becomes a parameter, not a constant. It adjusts as the dream requires. This mutability extends to setting and narrative. Locations merge, time distorts, objects transform, and yet, within this flux the hallucinated self remains oriented. The dreamer often retains a sense of place, of movement, of intention. The world may be strange, but the self responds to it as if it were real. Emotional responses are genuine, even when the trigger is fictional. Fear, joy, grief, embarrassment, all are experienced without dilution. The dream self may not know it dreams, but it feels nonetheless. Scientific evidence supports this strange fidelity. Studies using high-resolution neuroimaging have shown that the patterns of activation during dreaming mirror those during real perception. When a dreamer reports seeing a face, the fusiform face area is active. When a dream includes movement, the motor cortex prepares motion, though the body remains still. This sensoromotor mirroring suggests that the brain's experience of the dream world is not symbolic or abstract. It is embodied. The hallucinated self is not imagined from afar, it is inhabited. And yet, upon waking, this self shifts again. The dream is quickly forgotten. The emotions fade. The details dissolve. This transition is rapid, almost ruthless. The hallucinated self vanishes, replaced by the waking self, who often finds the dream puzzling, illogical, or absurd. What felt real now seems distant. This forgetting may serve a purpose. It prevents confusion between internal and external reality. It preserves the integrity of waking perception, but it also obscures the richness of the dream self's experience. Each night a world is built, felt, and then erased. Here lies one more soft paradox. The brain spends hours constructing vivid, immersive realities for a self it will not remember. It does so without instruction, without external stimulus, without reward. It performs this nightly act because it must, not because it chooses to. And the self it creates, hallucinatory, emotional, unstable, is nonetheless treated as real. There is no audience, and yet the performance continues, so the sleeper breathes, and the eyes move beneath closed lids. The world outside is still, but within, the self walks corridors, opens doors, speaks in imagined voices. The brain does not know it is dreaming, because it cannot afford to know. The illusion must hold. The self must believe. Only then can the rehearsal complete, the simulation run, the integration occur. And when the dream ends, the self dissolves quietly, leaving only traces, a mood, a question, a fading image of a place that never was. The hallucinated self has done its work, and the body sleeps on. Beneath the tranquil surface of sleep, where the brain conjures motion in stillness and emotion in silence, another subtle phenomenon begins to take shape, a strange form of cognitive rehearsal, where problems once faced in waking life reappear, reshaped, reimagined. The sleeper may not know it, but the brain has brought unfinished puzzles into the dream. Not always directly, not always in their original form, but refracted through the surreal lens of REM. A broken tool becomes a missing key, a failed conversation becomes a flooded room, a hesitation becomes flight. This is not metaphor, not intention, but the natural effect of how memories and unresolved experiences are activated and recombined. In dreams, especially during REM sleep, the brain does not solve problems step by step. It lets them drift until something unfamiliar emerges, a new connection, a strange resolution. It is problem solving through abstraction, through distance, through the suspension of conscious constraint. Studies have begun to map this process. Researchers have shown that individuals awakened from REM sleep are more likely to find creative solutions to word puzzles or lateral thinking tasks than those roused from non-REM stages. This effect is not dramatic but consistent. REM seems to allow access to remote associations, linking ideas that during waking remain apart. The brain's associative networks become more fluid. Inhibitory control, which during the day prunes away the implausible, relaxes. The result is a mind more willing to consider the unlikely, to entertain the novel, to try combinations it would normally dismiss. This is not random, it is emergent. The brain, left to its own devices, drifts toward recombination. This recombination is not always useful. Many dreams are nonsensical, disjointed or irrelevant, but occasionally the result carries insight, not in the form of direct answers, but in the reframing of a question. A tension resolves, a fear lessens, a perspective shifts. The dream offers not instruction, but rearrangement. By breaking apart and rebuilding internal representations, the brain may discover something it did not know it knew. It may stumble into clarity, not through effort, but through release. There is a soft irony in this, that the unconscious mind, often seen as chaotic or opaque, may be better equipped for certain types of synthesis than the conscious one. While awake, the brain prioritizes accuracy, utility, realism. While asleep, it privileges association, metaphor, and emotional salience. The result is not truth, but potential. A symbol may point toward a solution, even if the dreamer never recognizes it. A pattern may shift, even if it cannot be recalled. The benefit lies not in the memory of the dream, but in the trace it leaves behind, a neural afterimage that subtly alters the path of thought. Some researchers have attempted to trace this phenomenon to specific neural mechanisms. The loosening of association during REM has been linked to changes in dopamine regulation and the reduction of noradrenaline, creating a neurochemical environment that promotes novelty and emotional depth while suppressing vigilant reasoning. The anterior cingulate and medial prefrontal cortex remain moderately active during REM, supporting self-referential processing. Meanwhile, the hippocampus engages in spontaneous replay of recent experiences, and the neocortex receives and reshapes these traces. The result is a kind of sandbox, emotionally charged, creatively permissive, neurologically guided. Dreams, in this view, are not errors in cognition, but a different mode of it. Still, the mysteries remain. Why do some dreams lead to breakthroughs while others dissolve into incoherence? Why do only certain types of problems reappear in sleep? Can the dream be nudged, its themes shaped by intention, or is it sealed from conscious influence? Experiments in targeted memory reactivation suggest that cues introduced during wakefulness, sounds, smells, even thoughts, can influence dream content and improve retention of specific material. But this effect is delicate. Too strong a signal may disrupt sleep. Too weak, and it vanishes. The dream is sensitive, responsive, but not easily steered. Another soft contradiction emerges here. For centuries, dreams have been mined for meaning. interpreted as prophecies, messages, or insights from hidden selves. Modern neuroscience resists such certainty. It does not deny that dreams can be meaningful, but insists that their meaning lies not in symbolism but in process. The dream is not a code to be broken, but a state to be understood. Its power is not in what it tells, but in what it does, the way it allows the brain to wander, to recombine, to discover. In the animal world, similar processes have been observed. Rats trained to run mazes show neural replay of their routes during sleep, sometimes in compressed or even reversed order. Birds practicing songs while awake exhibit rehearsal patterns during sleep. These are not metaphors. They are biological rehearsals, implicit, automatic, embedded in the cycles of rest. Problem-solving, it seems, is not uniquely human nor uniquely conscious. The brain solves what it can, when it can, in whatever form the moment allows, and yet the dream rarely presents the solution directly. More often, it alters the framing. What seemed important loses urgency. What felt distant becomes close. The brain does not announce the change. It enacts it, quietly, across hours of simulation. The sleeper may awaken with no memory of the dream but a new sense of possibility. The answer may still be elusive, but the path toward it has shifted. This is not revelation. It is reorientation. The final irony is that the dream's most important function may be the one we least notice. We dream not to remember, but to reorganize, not to explain, but to explore, not to resolve, but to rearrange. The sleeper turns, the cortex fires, the symbols unfold. Problems dissolve, not through solving, but through drifting. The brain, freed from waking clarity, moves towards something stranger, and in doing so sometimes finds what it did not know it was looking for. So the eyes flicker beneath the lids and the dream begins again. No instructions, no maps, no outcomes guaranteed. Only the brain, echoing its own questions back to itself, reforming its circuits in the soft light of unknowing. And when morning arrives, the dream is gone, but something remains. A thought less heavy, a fear less sharp, a problem no longer quite the same. The brain has worked in silence, and the sleeper opens their eyes. Within the theatre of REM sleep, where the self walks in silent hallucination and problems dissolve into pattern, the body remains almost perfectly still. Muscles fall slack, limbs do not twitch, mouths do not speak, legs do not run. This immobility is not a side effect. It is a deliberate paralysis, orchestrated by the brainstem and enforced with precision. The pons, an ancient structure near the base of the brain, sends inhibitory signals through the medulla, down the spinal cord, silencing motor neurons and preventing voluntary movement. This mechanism, called REM atonia, is the brain's way of safeguarding the dream. Without it, we might act out every imagined motion, climb invisible stairs, strike at ghosts, flail through shadows. Instead, the body becomes a vessel of stillness, while the brain simulates motion with astonishing realism. The paradox is complete. The body is paralyzed, yet the brain moves freely. And move it does. In dream after dream, the sleeper runs, speaks, reaches, falls. The motor cortex is not dormant. It activates in patterns nearly identical to waking movement. Neural signatures associated with grasping, walking, even speaking can be observed in imaging studies of REM sleep. The premotor and supplementary motor areas light up, preparing actions that will never be completed. The cerebellum, responsible for coordination and timing, contributes its rhythm. The internal model of the body, its balance, its posture, its spatial orientation, remains active, even as the muscles lie inert. This simulation is not partial, it is embodied. The brain does not merely imagine motion, it rehearses it. Such rehearsals may serve many purposes. One theory holds that dreaming allows the motor system to maintain coordination without actual exertion, preserving neural pathways while conserving energy. Another suggests that this internal movement forms part of the brain's effort to consolidate procedural memory, skills and habits that are practiced and reinforced during sleep. A musician may play silent scales in their dream. A dancer may rehearse a turn. A child learning to walk may run through those new patterns again, night after night, without taking a step. The body forgets, but the nervous system remembers. This form of embodied dreaming extends beyond pure motion. The somatosensory cortex, which maps touch across the surface of the body, also becomes active. Dreamers report sensations of heat, cold, pressure, pain, all conjured internally with no external cause. These sensations are not hallucinations in the traditional sense. They are internal experiences born from the same circuits that interpret real-world stimuli. The brain, deprived of input from the senses, generates its own. A blanket becomes water. A kiss becomes wind. A sudden fall reverberates through the spine. The body lies still, but the dream self feels everything. Here lies another subtle irony. In the waking world, sensation confirms reality. We trust touch, pressure, movement to orient ourselves in space. In dreams, those same sensations are generated without reference. They come from within, and yet feel no less real. The brain's capacity to simulate bodily experience is so complete that it cannot distinguish between internal rehearsal and external interaction. This indistinguishability gives dreams their immersive quality. We do not think we are dreaming because the dream feels like life. It is not the content but the embodiment that convinces us. Yet not all is perfectly regulated. In some sleep disorders, such as REM sleep behavior disorder, the paralysis of REM fails. The sleeper begins to move, to act out dreams, to gesture, to speak. These episodes can be dangerous as the boundary between simulation and action collapses. The body responds to internal motion with real motion. Researchers have found that this disorder may be an early sign of neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's disease. The link is not yet fully understood, but the breakdown of rematonia reveals just how delicately balanced the system is. The body must remain still for the mind to roam freely. Without this contract, the dream becomes physical. On the opposite end, sleep paralysis, a state in which the mind wakes but the body remains immobile, offers another glimpse into the fragility of this mechanism. The experience is often described as terrifying. Awareness returns, but the body does not respond. Sometimes fragments of dreams linger into waking, producing hallucinations or sensations of pressure. The brain is caught between modes, no longer asleep, not yet fully awake. The systems that govern motion and perception are out of sync. This state does not last long, but its vividness speaks to the depth of the processes usually hidden beneath consciousness. Still, the question remains, why simulate motion at all if the body cannot move? Why spend energy rehearsing actions in an environment without consequence? The answer may lie in the nature of plasticity. The brain, like a muscle, strengthens through use, even imagined use. Motor imagery in waking life has been shown to enhance skill acquisition. Athletes and performers visualize routines to improve performance. In sleep, the rehearsal becomes automatic, unconscious, embodied. The brain practices not only what it has done, but what it might do. Dreams become a playground for future action, a space where the limits of the body are suspended, but the architecture of movement remains intact. Another layer emerges when considering lucid dreaming. In those rare moments when the dreamer becomes aware within the dream, it becomes possible to direct movement, to fly, to speak, to change setting. Brain activity in these states shows increased engagement of frontal regions, suggesting that volition returns, yet the body remains still. The dream becomes an active simulation, guided by conscious intent but constrained by the same muscle atonia. It is a unique combination, agency without action, freedom without risk. The dreamer moves through imagined space, controlling a body that does not exist. So the body lies in stillness, the eyes closed, the limbs heavy, yet the brain walks, climbs, falls. Muscles rest, but the circuits that govern them fire with purpose. The dream self moves through forests, cities, stairwells, oceans, none of them real, all of them felt. The somatic envelope of waking life is preserved, simulated, inhabited. The body is not needed. The blueprint is enough. And when the dream ends, the motion ceases. The motor cortex quiets. The atonia lifts. The body stirs. A foot moves. A hand flexes. Breath deepens. The sleeper returns to motion, unaware that the night has been filled with imagined movement. The rehearsal is over, but its imprint remains. A skill is retained. A gesture is refined. A fall has been caught before it ever occurred, and the body, having slept in perfect stillness, wakes more prepared to move. Beneath the surface of sleep, in the quiet hours when words dissolve and time loses its edge, the brain continues a deeper task, not simply rehearsal or memory, but a soft kind of healing. This is not physical repair in the way tissues mend or bones knit, but emotional recalibration, a process through which pain is recontextualized, loss is softened, and trauma begins, slowly and without ceremony, to loosen its grip. Nowhere is this more quietly visible than in the dreaming brain's treatment of distress. During REM sleep, especially in its later cycles, emotional memories are not merely stored, they're modulated, replayed with new edges, infused with symbolic variation. A scene returns, but from a different angle. A threat reappears, but without consequence. The amygdala may fire, but the chemical terrain has shifted. Norepinephrine, the fuel of fear, is suppressed. Emotion is present, but intensity is lowered. The stage is set not for confrontation, but for integration. This is not healing in the dramatic sense. There are no revelations, no resolutions. The brain does not rewrite the past. It reframes it. It reactivates painful traces in a chemically safe space, then allows them to play out in altered form. In this space, the sleeper may dream of the argument but forget the shouting, recall the departure but replace the face. The narrative is not fixed. The point is not accuracy. The point is reprocessing, activating circuits so that their weight can change. The fear is not erased, but recoded. A memory remains, but no longer demands a visceral response. The emotional volume lowers, allowing space to breathe. Clinical studies support this process. Sleep, especially REM-rich sleep, has been shown to reduce the emotional charge associated with previously distressing events. When participants are shown emotionally charged images and then allowed to sleep, their physiological responses to those images the next day are measurably diminished. When sleep is prevented, the responses persist. This suggests that dreaming offers not simply rest, but emotional progression. It is not forgetting. It is metabolizing, a neural alchemy that transforms raw experience into something more livable. Yet, this process is not infallible. In cases of trauma, especially post-traumatic stress, the normal integration of emotional memory during REM appears disrupted. Instead of replaying and diffusing the memory, the brain reactivates it with full intensity, and the norepinephrine suppression fails. Nightmares occur, vivid, repeating, emotionally overwhelming. The brain replays the event but cannot mute it. The rehearsal becomes re-injury. This failure of dream-based modulation is not well understood, but it underscores the delicacy of the system. For healing to occur, the neurochemical environment must be just right. Too much arousal, and the dream becomes another wound. Too little activation, and the memory remains untouched. Even so, therapeutic interventions have begun to engage with this knowledge. Techniques like imagery rehearsal therapy, in which patients rewrite their nightmares while awake, then rehearse the altered version, can lead to changes in dream content. Over time, the new version may appear spontaneously, allowing the dream to complete what waking life could not. This is not simply narrative editing. It is a way of offering the brain a new set of associations, a new script to follow in its silent theatre. And when it works, the effect is not just fewer nightmares, but fewer waking symptoms. The healing reaches outward. But not all emotional healing in dreams is tied to trauma. Everyday grief, frustration, insecurity, these too are subject to the quiet filtering of sleep. A moment of shame replays with a gentler ending. A goodbye becomes a silent visit. A fear becomes a chase without a destination. The content may be opaque. The symbolism may mean nothing. But the structure matters. The emotion is engaged, held, transformed in an environment that does not reject or suppress it. Unlike waking reflection, which demands articulation, dreaming simply allows. It processes without language. Here lies another soft irony. The dream may be forgotten entirely, but its effect persists. The sleeper may wake unaware of what occurred, but with a mood subtly shifted, a heaviness slightly lifted. The healing is not dependent on insight. It does not require recall. The process unfolds at a level beneath conscious access. It is felt in the margins. A calmer morning, a less reactive mind, a feeling that something unnamed has passed. The brain, in its sleeping state, has done what words could not. This process also appears to be cumulative. Emotional recalibration does not complete in one night. The same themes return, night after night, adjusted, filtered, softened. The brain tries again and again, reactivating circuits not to dwell but to shape. The goal is not to forget but to move. Dreams are not instant cures. They are iterations. Each night brings a new attempt, a new angle, a new association. Healing becomes a rhythm, not a revelation. And still, there is mystery. Why do some emotions fade while others persist? Why does one dream lighten a burden while another intensifies it? Why do some themes recur for years while others vanish after a single night? These are not questions with clear answers. The emotional logic of dreams is not linear. It does not follow narrative arc or therapeutic model. It obeys its own rhythms, influenced by biochemistry, memory strength, personal history, and perhaps randomness. The brain does what it can with what it has. Sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it tries again. So the sleeper turns, eyes still beneath lids, breath deep and even. The memory reactivates, the image unfolds, the fear returns, but it is changed, slower, quieter, distorted in a way that allows observation without re-injury. The neural circuits fire. The amygdala responds. The cortex adjusts. And as the dream drifts forward, the emotional shape of the memory shifts. Morning will come, and the dream will dissolve. But something small will remain, a recalibrated synapse, a softened response, a trace of healing not consciously known but no less real. As the dream continues, quiet and unseen, the brain enters yet another phase of its nightly labour. a state not merely of replay or recalibration, but of structural readiness. This is the realm of neuroplasticity by moonlight, when circuits soften, thresholds shift, and the possibility of change reopens. While waking life demands consistency, familiar habits, stable memories, practiced responses, sleep permits something else. It allows the mind to loosen its grip. Neural patterns become more malleable. Synapses strengthened by learning or repetition are either reinforced or gently weakened. New dendritic spines may begin to grow. Others, unused, may disappear. This reshaping is not chaotic. It follows a logic written in calcium flow and protein synthesis, in the rise and fall of sleep phases. The brain, in rest, becomes not static but flexible, a system prepared not just to maintain what it knows, but to adapt, to learn, to become. This plasticity does not require dreaming to be vivid. It does not depend on narrative. Even in nights without remembered dreams, the architecture of the brain may shift. Research shows that sleep, and REM sleep in particular, enhances learning across domains, from spatial navigation to language acquisition, from motor skills to abstract insight. Subjects who sleep after learning a task perform better the next day than those who remain awake. The improvements are not only behavioral, they are structural. Imaging studies reveal changes in brain connectivity, especially between the hippocampus and neocortex. The new information, once volatile, becomes integrated. What was unfamiliar becomes available. This is not memorization, it is transformation. The mind reshapes itself to include the new, and yet, sleep is not just a time for consolidating what is already known. It is a time for preparing the ground for what will be. The next day's experiences are shaped not only by what was dreamed, but by how the circuits were primed. In animal studies, neurons in the visual cortex show increased responsiveness to stimuli encountered after sleep. In humans, performance on tasks involving insight or creativity improves not just through rest, but through a specific pattern of brain activity during sleep, one that includes slow-wave oscillations, spindles, and REM bursts. These are not passive states, they are active reorganizers. Each phase of sleep contributes differently, and together they form a rhythm of potential. One of the most striking discoveries of recent years is that this plasticity does not end with youth. While it is true that young brains are more plastic, adult brains retain the ability to change, and sleep is central to this capacity. In adults learning a new skill or adapting to a change in environment, sleep continues to play a role in strengthening or reshaping the relevant circuits. After motor learning, for example, regions of the motor cortex show increased spindle activity during the following night. After language exposure, regions associated with auditory and semantic processing become more synchronized. The changes are subtle but cumulative. With each night of sleep, the brain refines its internal model of the world, not by adding more data, but by restructuring how it is stored. This ongoing adaptability also extends to emotional learning. Sleep helps the brain not only reduce the salience of old fears, but also incorporate new emotional experiences. A bond formed, a betrayal felt, a gesture misunderstood. All of these are folded into the brain's affective map, not instantly, but over time, across nights. The circuits that support empathy, trust, or avoidance are reshaped slowly, through repeated exposure and silent rehearsal. The plasticity of the emotional brain is not about erasing feelings, but about recalibrating responses. A repeated kindness may begin to feel safe. A recurring anger may begin to quiet. These changes are slow, almost invisible, and yet they accumulate, forming the emotional landscape of waking life. Still, Plasticity is not always adaptive. In certain conditions, such as chronic stress or anxiety, the same processes that allow growth can reinforce maladaptive patterns. The circuits of rumination, for example, can become more deeply entrenched if sleep is disrupted or emotionally charged dreams are repeated without modulation. Sleep, while protective, is not foolproof. It reflects the input it receives. A mind dominated by fear may dream in cycles. A mind open to change may shift more easily. The content of waking life matters. But even in difficulty, the opportunity for adjustment remains. The brain does not lock itself. It waits. It responds to subtle cues, not commands, not decisions, but patterns. This is perhaps one of the most quiet and profound realities of sleep, that it holds open the door to change without asking for awareness. No conscious effort is needed to update a memory, to let go of a fear, to begin to see something differently. The process is embedded. It unfolds in silence, in the absence of language, without narrative. The brain rewires not with effort, but with rhythm, with repetition, with consistency, with rest. Even without insight, healing can begin. Even without control, the mind can grow. And then morning comes. The circuits have shifted. A skill once awkward feels more fluid. A name long forgotten surfaces easily. A frustration seems less sharp. The changes are small but persistent. They are the work of nights, of sleep's patient labour, of REM's rehearsals and slow waves recalibrations. The brain has not only remembered, it has reformed. It has not only rested, it has prepared. So the sleeper lies beneath blankets surrounded by darkness. The neurons fire in low rhythms, then burst in fast oscillations. The cortex reactivates, then quiets. A pathway strengthens. A connection fades. The architecture is redrawn, subtly but decisively. The mind becomes, not through will, but through allowing. And when the dream ends and the body stirs, the person who rises is slightly changed, not in form, not in memory, but in readiness. The world remains the same, but the self is newly aligned. And now, in the final descent of night, the dreaming mind reaches the edge of sleep's slow revolution, not its end, but its farthest curve. The cycles of REM and deep sleep have turned again and again, shifting through patterns of memory, emotion, motion, repair. Each 90-minute arc has carried its own work, its own rhythm, its own silent choreography. Now the last rotation begins, and with it comes the longest stretch of REM, the final bloom of the dreaming brain before it returns to the waking world. This is the hour of long dreams, strange, vivid, sometimes recursive, the hour when memory, emotion, and imagination blend most freely. The brain has grown quiet in some places and luminous in others. The self floats through a story it does not control, built of fragments it cannot name. And yet the dream continues, uninterrupted, unfolding in full fidelity to the logic of the sleeper's own internal world. It is here, in this last stretch of RM, that the accumulated processes of the night converge. The brain is not doing something new, but repeating its cycle with more space, more intensity, more freedom. Glymphatic tides have long since slowed, their sweeping work mostly done. Synaptic pruning has refined the day's input, preserving what mattered, forgetting what didn't. Emotional memories have been played and replayed, softened or reweighted, made livable. Procedural circuits have been rehearsed. Patterns have been reinforced or revised. Now, in this final REM phase, the dream becomes more expansive, less bound to the events of the day, more likely to wander through older memories, symbolic gestures, impossible geometries. The hippocampus pulses in time with recalled spaces. The amygdala still flares but without threat. The default mode network sustains the illusion of continuity, and the motor system prepares actions that will never come. It is not a summary. It is not a climax. It is a continuation, the brain completing its nocturnal sentence. This final dreaming is often the part most remembered. Upon waking, it is the dream just left that lingers, the last scene, the last emotion. But even when forgotten, its effects remain. The last REM cycle contributes most to mood regulation. It allows for the final modulation of emotional tone. In studies where subjects are woken before their last REM period, irritability, impulsiveness, and cognitive inflexibility all increase. The mind is less tolerant, the emotions less balanced, and when that final cycle is restored, so too is a baseline of ease. The world feels less sharp, decisions come more fluidly, the self moves with more grace. The dream did not solve anything, it simply allowed integration to finish, and yet, even now, at the culmination of all this neural work, the purpose of dreaming remains elusive. Each section of the night has revealed a different function: memory consolidation, synaptic pruning, emotional modulation, motor rehearsal, waste clearance, plasticity. And still, dreaming itself defies singular explanation. It seems to stand just adjacent to every known process, participating in all, but not reducible to any. The images, the narratives, the dream self, they are not the cause but the surface. They are what dreaming feels like from within. But the deeper work continues underneath, wordless, formless, mechanical, and profound. It is tempting to think of dreams as messages, as stories with meanings, but the brain does not dream to entertain or enlighten. It dreams to recalibrate. The dream is a side effect, beautiful, strange, necessary, of deeper maintenance. Still, the side effect matters. The subjective experience of dreaming is not irrelevant to the brain's function. If it were unnecessary, evolution might have hidden it further, but instead the dream is vivid, emotional, unforgettable in the moment. Perhaps it serves a signaling function, a way of helping the organism attend to certain memories or themes. Or perhaps it is simply what happens when a brain as complex as ours turns inward, with circuits this dense, with memory this layered, with emotion this deep. The act of sleeping must produce something visible, something felt. The dream is the shadow of this process, the echo of repair. There is another quiet irony, that we're closest to waking at the moment when the dream is most immersive. The sleeper lies at rest, but the body prepares to return. Cortisol levels begin to rise. Heart rate increases slightly. Body temperature climbs. The muscles are still held in paralysis, but the systems that govern alertness begin to stir. The clock of the suprachiasmatic nucleus senses the shifting light. The endocrine system prepares the body for re-entry, yet the dream continues, unaware. The self within the dream believes in its world, even as that world is beginning to dissolve. The brain transitions not with abruptness, but with a final immersive offering. One more sequence, one more story before letting go. When waking does come, it may be gentle or jarring. The dream may end cleanly or fracture mid-scene. The dream self vanishes. The eyes open. The weight of the blanket returns. The ceiling becomes visible. The conscious mind reassembles itself, recalling its name, its responsibilities, its identity. The circuits of logic return. The prefrontal cortex reactivates. The motor system resumes control. And yet, for a few moments something lingers. An image, a feeling, a sense of having been elsewhere. The dream may fade, but its imprint persists. It shaped the mood, the readiness, the mental texture of the morning. The sleeper is not who they were 8 hours ago. They have been rewritten, quietly. So ends the cycle, not with resolution, but with continuation. The night has passed, but the work it contained will echo through the day. A memory will come more easily. A conversation will feel less heavy. A choice will feel less forced. These are not miracles. They are the result of slow, invisible recalibration, done in silence, in darkness, while the body lay still and the mind wandered far. The dream has done what it could. The brain has done what it must. And morning begins. Now the story slows. No more circuits to fire, no more fragments to reweave, no more scenes to replay. The final REM has passed, and the dreaming brain begins its long return to stillness. Not the quick awakening of an alarm clock or the rustle of morning light, but the soft unravelling of the night's quiet work. The pulses fade, the rhythm evens, the brain no longer rehearses, no longer imagines. It simply rests in its own steady breath. Memory has settled, emotion has cooled. The dream self has vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a hint of softness, a slight space cleared in the mind where something sharp used to be. Nothing is asked of you now. There is no need to rise, to remember, to explain. The sleep you have entered, or are entering still, has already done its work. The systems that hum beneath awareness have moved in cycles deep and slow. There is nothing to finish, nothing to fix. The night carries its own design, and your presence within it was enough. Around you, the world remains quiet. No wind against the windows, no ticking from the walls, just breath, in and out, and the slow retreat of thought, like water sinking back into sand. Even the brain, so full of light in REM, now dims. Activity ebbs. Circuits float in a low rhythmic synchrony, like trees swaying in windless air. There is no more simulation, no more rehearsal, only rest. Let this be the part without language, without image. Let the silence of the brain be mirrored by the silence of your limbs, your breath, your thoughts. Let yourself dissolve into the space left behind by dreaming. You have nothing more to do.